Yeah, you probably might need to take those notifications off your desktop, by the way.
Okay.
Because I think it's amazing to be doing this just by ourselves. You know that I'm so excited.
I thought you had a guy to do this or something.
Yeah, but I said, you know what? Let's keep it real, innit?
Okay, so guys, AE is the logistics person. So anything happening, you know exactly why this is going wrong.
Okay.
That's why I never do this myself, bro, because I have enough on my plate, man.
What are you hating for, man?
Okay, yalla, bismillah.
Let's just make sure that it's running proper.
So you want me to send the Zoom link on Facebook?
No, actually, it's working. It's working. All right. Alhamdulillah, I can't believe it. It's working.
Okay, so bismillah.
I don't know why I disrespected myself so much. Anyway, all right, folks, I think we're going to start now. I think we've pretty much, let me just move this to here. Yeah, I think we pretty much cracked it, yeah. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulil Kareem, Nabina Muhammad, wa'ala alihi, wصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you guys are doing good. It's myself, Abu Isa, and I pass it over to the good doctor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you guys are all doing well. Alhamdulillah. It's nice to be able to do this. We thank Allah Azza wa Jal for this technology, to be honest. SubhanAllah, I've said this multiple times. Can you imagine if this lockdown happened even 10 years ago, much less 20 years ago, what the situation would be? So we thank Allah Azza wa Jal that we're able to still benefit from one another, be in touch with our families, have FaceTime. Do you know the blessings of FaceTime with our relatives that, you know, we can't be close to? So alhamdulillah, we always look at the bright side. We always thank Allah for the blessings that we take for granted. And alhamdulillah, nice to be able to use technology to be able to speak to you live on a topic that is pertinent to each and every one of us here. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So yeah, firstly, I just want to make sure that I thank Al-Maghrib, mashallah, for doing a really, really good job. I mean, obviously, all of the masajid, all of the organizations have stepped up, serving the people, putting on programs, virtual khutbahs, you know, everything, reminders, regular, just to keep people's iman on the bounce, making sure that folks don't lose hope. It is pretty depressing times, but obviously these things come to test us, and you're meant to react properly. And if that means saying some cold truths and some harsh truths, then so be it. But alhamdulillah, Al-Maghrib running around like ants, sorting all these programs out, and they're hanging around in the background here as well. Don't think that me and Shaykh Yasir got here just like that. But obviously we'll take all the glory, but we know obviously who the real champions and the real heroes are. Anyway, I want to especially thank them for being able to secure the big kahuna himself, Shaykh Dr. Yasir Qadhi Sahab, mashallah, hafizahullah wa dammat barakatuh. And because my man is not cheap to secure for these programs, let me tell you, man, he's not cheap. It's an amazing coup, to be honest, amazing coup. And let's be. I'm only joking. Al-Maghrib could never afford Shaykh Yasir. Like,
that's exactly what. All of this bakwas, man. It's like, my man ain't cheap. Subhanallah. Total free, man. Majanan. Subhanallah. Mufta, complete.
I had to. It was the only way. Was to pull in favors, because you want to try and get him proper. You're having a laugh, mate. Having a laugh, right?
Exactly.
So seriously, folks. You know, one of the things that they would say of the Salaf, the early founding fathers of this religion, those guys who really set the basic principles and methodology that will preserve this religion and save us now as well, they used to be described, right? And you'll see this in many of the books of hadith or narrations, I should say rather, the musannafat, if you like, that if they were told individually that they were going to die tomorrow, then they would often say, we would not see a single change in anything that they did. Like, they wouldn't see a decrease, you wouldn't see an increase. And, you know, in contradistinction to something, to us, to our generation, if we heard something like that, you know, it's all then you're reassessing everything, you're checking everything. Did I do this? Did I do it? Have I written a will? Have I spoken to this? Have I fixed that? Have I got beef with this person, etc., etc. The point is that they were always ready, always prepared. They were worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like they were ready to meet him. They were living the sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ would turn around and look at the line of people, and he would say to them, pray as if it is your final prayer. And that would be for every single prayer. So they would get mentally in the right state of mind. And when they would say Allahu Akbar, they would really literally live that final moment, even though, of course, it wasn't. And in actual fact, 1400 odd years later, it still isn't. But the attitude needs to be the same. No ups, not downs, just keeping things constant, even if it means small, but always assuming that today could be that last day, tomorrow could be that last day. And that, of course, is what this virus has taught us, right? Everyone is now super, super aware of the important things in life. So the masajid, that folks, even those who hardly went to the masajid, now they're desperate and they miss the masajid so much. They're being missed like nothing before. People are making more dua, they're more aware of their salah and their deficiencies therein. They're reading more, studying more, watching more. They really want to get back into the game. They're appreciating the important things. Then with the family, with others all being in quarantine, folks are learning a whole load of new stuff, right? It's a range of different things that we're learning. So folks are realizing for the first time, for example, what your wife actually looks like, right? And wives aren't all that impressed with what their husbands are bringing to the party either. You're suddenly learning what actual year your kids are studying in, right? What year are you in? Yeah, what? Year 8. Are you sure you're not in year 7? And you might even say some folks are even learning the dates of birth of their kids. It's like a real revelation at the moment. A lot of good things are happening in this kind of stressful time. But our relationships with our parents and our elders, we've been away from them in self-isolation. Those who are fortunate enough to be living separately or their houses are big enough. But in some houses, you're living with your parents in an even stricter self-isolation because you know that you can't yourself now let yourself loose because of the danger you can bring to the elders at home. But very sadly, of course, and that's what we're here to drop those truth bombs, there's very little change for many parents and many elders in our community and many family members as well. They've been in self-isolation, or I should say more accurately, we have been in self-isolation from them and their rights for many years. And these are the kind of things that we're now starting to realize, the broken relationships, the missed opportunities. And inshallah, myself and Shaykh Suleiman are going to be doing that half of this presentation. This is part 1, and then there's part 2 next week, inshallah, same time, same place. Myself and Shaykh Umar will be dealing with the family, the elderly, the vulnerable people, their rights upon us, how we perceive them, and what about those folks who make it so difficult for us, all of the difficult issues. I mean, it's easy to enjoy your family when everything's good and you all love one another and everything's going sweet. But what about those people who have caused you harm, their narcissism, their abuse, their stopping you from shining and from flowering into being who you want to be, and all of the issues that we all know in the different generation challenges. Protect This House, of course, is the class which this session is from. This is a glimpse into the Protect This House class, which is available online now. And it's divided into 2 halves. Today, we're going to present first the second half. Next week actually is the half of the family. And today, obviously, we can't expect to cover everything to do with parenting. I mean, it's like a whole weekend. It's 25, 30 odd hours just in terms of the material that you're going to study online. And then you've got all the bonus sessions with the mashayikh that you see in front of you. And I'll be doing some bonus sessions. We'll have some specialists as well doing parenting sessions and sessions on abuse and sessions on homeschooling, sessions on. So you've got panelists that will come. So it's going to be a large amount of material. You can't expect this week's session or next week's session to cover all of it. But we are going to dive in and try to, I think, touch upon some of the key areas of that half of the class, 20 hours of the class summarized in today's or tonight's session. What we're going to try and do it in a bit of a different way, not necessarily from a questions point of view, because all of the questions that are going to be asked on Zoom tonight, those who are on the direct link, and then those who are on Facebook, all of that's being collected, and that will be dealt with then in the live session now. The structure of tonight, after I just finish this little short monologue for another 1 or 2 minutes, is that we're going to go back and forth between myself and Shaykh Yasir and discuss some of the key aspects that we need to be aware of. And here's the point, that if the virus has made everybody aware, then that's a deficiency in us, because this crisis should not have in any single way changed that imperative or priority from us to protect our family in the crisis that is modern life. This virus is just one small reminder of the realities of modern life. But in actual fact, the challenges of modernity to our children are, I don't need to spell that out. It's so obvious. It's very different to even when we were young kids, and that's only 30, 40 years ago. And when you compare that to 30, 40 years before that, it's a whole different life entirely. The internet, the access to information, the access to be misguided, the various ideas, the desires that can be so fulfilled by absolutely everything, has produced a whole next level of fitna. The Prophet ﷺ said that no time will come except that the time after it will be worse. So by definition, parenting will become more difficult. The challenge to protect our children will become more difficult, which is why the class was always called Protect This House, even back in the day. And it's something which right now is as relevant right now, but we've become so heedless of our children, their welfare, their guidance, their paths, their activities, their hobbies, who they really are, and what you, me and you have done throughout life to ensure that you're controlling that situation, that you're fixing that situation, that they become people of Jannah, not the fire. Because it's simple. You sit back and leave these children in our time right now, in this society, at this time, society will take them away, right? If you are not their best friend and closest confidant, then they certainly will. There's a million people out there, a million advertisers, a million thought leaders, there's a million fashion makers who all are waiting to jump in because they're all a consumer, they're all the future, they're all a direction that will take society in a way that it will go. And if you leave them, then they will end up as the people of the fire. Now you may think that that's so very negative, but the truth is that 9 times out of 10, that's what will happen. You can't depend on chance. You can't just say, right, I brought kids into life. I looked after them until 13, 15, 16, whatever, and that's it. And now tawakkal Allah, put the trust in Allah. You can't depend upon chance when it's clear that 9 out of 10 will just go with the dominant society, what they enjoy, what they like, what they see on TV, what they see on YouTube, what the kind of books that they read, the movies that they watch, the ideas that are imbued into their hearts and minds. And you can't hope that your kid is going to be the miracle 1 out of 10, right? That many of us, like myself and Shaykh Yasir, for example, and many of the du'at and many of the scholars and many of the people who are watching right now, because right now there's a couple of thousand people probably online on the Facebook and on the Zoom. What is that as a representative of just the Muslims in the UK, for example? We're 2-3 million people. And then you look at the world audience, which is currently, this is broadcast to hundreds and hundreds of millions. So you're looking at infinitesimally small numbers of what we call truly practicing people. And this audience, I would say, the vast majority of them are the 1 in 10 who started practicing by some kind of fluke, by some great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We blagged it basically, some extraordinary event, some extraordinary stress, some extraordinary moment of guidance, some literally movement from just something that we couldn't possibly have been able to plan. Our parents were not equipped or had the ability to be able to carry us through, but somehow by the immense grace and mercy of Allah, we fixed up and now we're here. So for our kids, we can't take that risk. We've got to plan it out. And that's something, as I said, I've been banging on about for a decade now. We taught this class now. It's been our main class at Al-Maghrib. It's a whole weekend of study. And you do genuinely, let alone now that you've got the time to study, but you do need to study and take your family seriously, understand the risks, understand the solutions and whatever. Anyway, for tonight, what we're going to do is something a bit different. We're going to shake it up, do something a bit novel and fresh, obviously, like the virus itself, because it's novel, new word. We're all learning all these new words, bumping the curve, keeping the curve, getting in front of the curve, blah, blah, blah. Want to keep it real. So I had a chat with YQ and I said, all right, this is how we're going to do this. I'm going to think of 5 questions or points that I would like to ask him and him the same to me. We're going to give a 5-minute take on it. So I'll give an opening monologue, which is done now. And then we're going to go back and forth with 5 questions, completely random. He has no idea, no planning, no script, as Cheeky Yani, he put it earlier on. So he has no idea what I'm going to ask him. He has no idea what I'm going to, I have no idea what he's going to ask me. And we're just going to share our honest, immediate, first opinion, what we believe in, because that's the first opinion. Not having time to plan it out and research and Google and you look at our books is going to be what our practice is and what our real belief is. And I really want to share that now, because we are now in the crisis of the crisis. It's actually, the difference right now is that there's a possibility that we're not going to be there to bring up our children. This idea that it's only 70s and 80s and 60 plus is the American experience right now has really changed everybody's minds. They've shown that a number of young people, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all of us now are at genuine risk. We are really staring at our own mortality, which means that we ourselves now, if we don't put something in place, might not even be around through this next few months to look after our own kids. Now that might sound very, morbid, but it's a fact. Who knows? Allah is the one who decides. So anyway, we're going to start off like that. Shaykh Yasir, you agree with that plan? Yeah?
Bismillah, let's go for it.
Allah. So I start with the first question then. So here we go, Bismillah. One of the things that I've loved that you once said, it really resonated with me, and I actually teach it in a class as well. And it's so true. You said once that kids don't usually follow their illustrious parents, like historically speaking. So when you look at the big scholars of Islam, the big imams, you only remember their names, but you never remember their children. And if this is all meant to be such a, a big imperative, looking after our kids, being so much on that game, what's happened? Where are their kids? Why haven't they reached? And we always want our children to be better than us. That's obviously the aim of every parent. Where are their children? You mentioned maybe their grandkids and their later generations, but the actual direct children, no. And obviously, folks might be watching this and saying, you know what, Islamic history, we don't know too much about. So I say, forget about Islamic history. Just look at your current scholars. Think of the big personalities that you know in our current time, whether Quran or whether ilm. So, for example, you think of the name like Minshawi, for example, or Abdul Basit, for example. Why don't we know the children of Minshawi and Abdul Basit? The Bin Bazis, for example, Salman al-Auda, for example, the Albanis, the Uthaymins, the Qardawis. We remember them, we don't see their children. It's like they sacrificed their focus on their kids to be the next big thing and surpass them. And instead, they said, you know what, we're going to focus on what we're giving to the people because we can save them directly. And that's, of course, a noble effort. Is that the right decision? Only Allah knows in the end. Your thoughts?
Bismillah ar-Rahman. Jazakallah khair for organizing this, and this is raw. I want to reiterate that this is not staged. Generally speaking, almost every interview that you come across, the questions are known and the answers are formulated because it makes it a more deeper interview. Ustad Abu Isa was very clear. He wants it to be raw and genuine. So yes, I don't know his question. He does not know my questions. The first question is actually thrown back at me because I'm the one who told this to you many, many years ago. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience, when I went to Medina, it struck me because the teachers I was studying with, obviously you get to see and know their own sons, and you realize, like, hold on a sec, it's not the same level. And then you even meet some of the great ulama. I study with Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, so I met his sons. I met one of the sons of Ibn Baz and others as well. And Shaykh Abdurrahman al-Jibreen as well, I visited him as well, Abdullah ibn Jibreen, excuse me, and you see the family. And it's just historically true that the great ulama, generally speaking, their immediate families and their sons and daughters are not following their fathers in their same role. And I even asked one of the great scholars that I studied with this question, and he laughed at me. He said, join the club, like, welcome. This is the reality of our state. And he said that he quoted an anecdote from Imam Malik that once Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi came to study with him. And as he was walking in to write notes with him, Imam Malik's son went outside to basically go play ball or whatever you want to call the equivalent, And Imam Malik said, subhanAllah, my own son is leaving while this guy from Andalus comes in, because he came from Andalus, all the way from literally the other side of the world. He came to study. And the guy born and raised in the house of Imam Malik is rushing out to go play ball, essentially, right? Now, Ustad Abu Isa, you said that you said a phrase that I disagree with. You said that they don't concentrate on their kids and they're concentrated on the ummah. And I don't view it that way. I view it that psychologically, and this is my personal opinion, and you want it raw and you want it complete unscripted, this is unscripted. Psychologically, children of ulama don't appreciate ilm because they're surrounded by it from day one. That's the way I view it. That the library, I have 10,000 books here, right? My kids have grown up seeing these books. They see me with them all the time. They are somewhat irritated at me always giving lectures and durus, right? It actually pulls me away from them. And in the beginning, my youngest would always say, why do you have to leave and teach us? I think subconsciously teach others. Subconsciously, they kind of they don't really appreciate, and then maybe even there's a sense of resentment. Allah knows best. I'm being very raw and honest here, that there could be that potential. It's just like the children of very wealthy people, they don't appreciate wealth, right? It's literally they're born into it, okay? Children of billionaires, they don't appreciate money because they're born into it. And even if they need it, they don't understand they need it because it's handed to them. So the way I view it, Ustadana, Shaykhana, is I don't view it as a failure. I don't. I rather, you're jumping the gun because this is one of my other points here, but my goal is not that my children become ulama or students of knowledge. That's not even my goal. That's not the goal that I have. And frankly, it wasn't even the goal of my own parents with me. That's Allah's choice, whoever he chooses. My goal is that my children are righteous in their lives, that they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they have good akhlaq, that they marry, good spouses. That's really my goal. So the goal is not to be an alim. That's really not, you can't see, dear parents, you cannot live your dreams through your children, man. That's a big problem. That's a huge problem. You might want to have been an alim. Now you're 40 years old. You cannot live your dreams through your teenager. And I strongly, strongly discourage anybody from doing that, because that's going to be a disaster 9 times out of 10. Maybe 1 time out of 10 it's going to be correct. But 9 times out of 10, if you're going to force your kids down a path, that is just not. And so from the beginning, I've been very, very open with my children. Whatever career they want to do, whatever path they want to take, as long as they're praying regularly and they have good akhlaq. And even this is our struggle. We're going to come to this. Not that just because you're in a family of religiosity, it doesn't mean you're going to absorb religiosity. We'll get to this point as well. So in a nutshell, that's my response to your your first point or question. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I was thinking that, folks, I was thinking that we'll do 5 minutes and then a 1 minute response. But I'm thinking that it's probably best for us to save that time, especially when the point is a wider one, which we agree with. I think that there is a question that I haven't to say back, but I want to save that to be a number, actually a specific question. So you go with yours now.
Okay. I have a very frank question for you. Very, very frank.
No shararati behavior, honestly, man. We agreed though.
No shararati. Don't worry. Very frank question. Do you really think, Ustadina, that a person who has studied ilm and Islamic knowledge is, just by virtue of his ilm, more qualified to give parental advice than others?
So no, 100% in actual fact,
Exactly.
Definitely not. In actual fact, one of the things that I teach in a class and actually spend a whole session on is I go on one of your famous tangents, okay, and go out of the subject, and I say to them that one of the greatest blessings, or mercies actually I use is the phrase, one of the greatest mercies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us is that he left a few areas of Islam open and not made them tawqifi. So for example, what I mean by that, everybody who's listening, when we say something is tawqifi, we mean that Allah has established a very specific way that it needs to be done. There is no space for your own ijtihad or your own ideas. So for example, salah, okay, you don't have the ability to say, you know what, I'll pray 6 times a day, or I'll make it 7 times a day, or I'll make maghrib 4 times a day. It has to be done in the exact way that it has been prescribed. Fasting, hajj, whatever. So the major acts of ritual worship are like that. But there are other major acts of ritual worship that have not been made like that. And one of the great blessings, for example, one of the great messages of Allah is da'wah. Da'wah, imagine, I tell my students in the class, imagine if Allah had made da'wah tawqifi, and we had to make da'wah today like Ibrahim alayhi salam made da'wah, right? We'd have to go in and start smashing up all those idols and, setting, the whole world alight. And it would my goodness, just imagine that. Imagine if Allah had not allowed for us to be able to use political routes of da'wah. Imagine if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just imagine that Allah had not in the Quran told us about the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Imagine just the presence of the interaction between Sulaiman alayhi salam and Bilqis allows, the Queen of Sheba, allows us to understand that sometimes you impress people and change their hearts and minds with your power, with your skills, with your wealth, with your rhetoric, and it doesn't have to be just a physical way. And also, of course, we do have a military aspect. We do have a physical aspect. So there's many options on the table, which is a proof that Allah has left all of these options for the scholars and the common sense of the people to use in the right way. Likewise, tarbiyah, the bringing up of your children has also been left open. Can you imagine if I had the arrogance to say that the only way to bring up your children is the way I teach you in this class, and I am the only one who knows the right way? Or even more stupid would be to say only the scholars, for example, know that. Shaykh Yasir asked the question, just because he has knowledge. Having knowledge in one thing does not mean you understand everything else. And parenting is a very complex combination of Islamic knowledge, good principles, common sense, this, that, and whether it's psychology from one side, whether it's educational psychology from another angle, so many different things. But what about this huge component of experience? Like I tell you right now, when I look at my parents, yeah, they didn't push me maybe in the way that I have ended up, or they didn't have that aspiration for me. But I can tell you that I won't turn around and say they did a bad job. I think they did a great job in the areas that they were focused on. What about the people from before? What books of psychology did they have? What books of whatever they had? Everybody has game, and we've just got to respect the game that they bring to the experience itself, and just must never ever be in that have the arrogance to believe that actually I know what's better. I definitely appreciate my system. So I want to thank you for saying that, because that is a point that humbles us, that makes us always reading, always looking out for other sources, other teachers, other scholars, other books. I have my favorite book, and this is a huge business area. That's where you've got to be careful as well. The danger is that you kind of then, whilst we say that no, the scholars, it's not necessarily scholarly qualification that qualifies you to be the best parent. We don't go the other way as well, where we think that just the educationalists are the ones who know best, or the child psychologists, and then you can get too caught up in a particular way. The Montessori way, the Montessori model is the only way forward, or the X model, or whatever. Everyone has some. My favorite book is Toxic Childhood. My favorite child psychologist was Sue Palmer, and I don't agree with every single thing that she says, but she's got some great points, and I've got to have the wherewithal to be able to take from other experts. Like it was a humbling experience for me, even in teaching. See, when I teach this class, Shaykh Yasir, when we teach Maghrib classes, you're the only teacher, you're the only person. In the online model, of course, you bring in specialists, right? You do panelists, and it's very rare in our position to have someone speak over you and to be disagreeing with you. And in a class, when someone disagrees, they're always worried, they don't want to be embarrassed, and they feel shy. But when they're there on the front and they're telling you this is actually the more correct way, this is what the science says, this is what I've seen, it's a humbling experience, and it adds to the quality. So yeah, no, definitely, Sheikh, 100% agree, 100%. What's your comment on that?
Jayyid. So the point that I wanted to raise with this, which is, of course, we're both in agreement, let no one assume that they themselves are not qualified to raise their own children better than other people. Let no one assume that a person who studied 20, 30, 40 years in an Islamic institute or a sheikh or an alim is better than they themselves are for their own kids. We are all equally struggling together, and being a parent is a universal phenomenon. True, somebody with a little bit of ilm can give you generic Quran and Sunnah, no doubt about that. But specifics, every single parent is qualified for their own children, with shura and Allah's help. Yeah.
And this point, by the way, is very important for all people to understand whether they have a children problem, a wife problem, a husband problem, a parent problem. They always come to the scholars and they tell us, what would you do? What's the whatever? And actually, the Islamic ruling. There's not some kind of different way that I can change the ruling towards you. You've got to have the confidence that you understand your kid, your wife, your husband best to be able to apply, right, Sheikh?
Agreed. That's exactly the point, that we both get this, all of us get this. People come to us and they say, Sheikh, we have this issue with our mother, our father, our brother, our sister, our daughter, and they think that just by presenting the problem to us, we can solve it. And they don't realize that 99% of it is human psychology, and 1%, if even that, is some fiqh or hadith or Quran. So they have 99% of the solution. Maybe we can just give them just a generic softening of the heart or whatever. Otherwise, it's all on them, to be honest, generally speaking.
Yeah. So, all right. The next, the question that I have for you then is this. Yeah. You made the point that we should not want to the aspiration for us not to see our dreams in our children. You always want to, you dress up your kids like that. It's so common that we see men, for example, take their boys, put the hat on, make them pray in the masjid when they're very, very small, something which I really don't like. I don't like that whole approach. Women, they dress up their little girls in the princess that they never were, all that kind of stuff, right? But that's at a low level. At the serious level is what you're saying, that you try to force them so desperately because you always dreamed that you couldn't be that person. Okay, that might be for the wider public, but who's going to take the responsibility of creating the next scholarly class? Like, me and you can't claim that. If we've reached the heights, or we are at the scholarly level, or we are at the public leading level, then your excuse doesn't, or your explanation doesn't hold water. It's not them. Like, we're not seeing our dreams You know what I mean? Like someone who's a non-scholar might be saying, I see my dream, I want my dreams in that kid. But from us, I am already there. So do you know my point? Who's going to take the responsibility of getting those children to be the scholars of the future? We need more scholars in the future than we need doctors and XYZ. That will always keep coming, right? So who's going to deal with it?
Fard kifaya. We need to make the parents of a community collectively understand and appreciate the need for the next generation to have ulama, so that when one of their children wants to go down the path, rather than blocking them, rather than putting impediments, they should encourage them. We have to change the psychology of the entire class of parents and not just a specific case of parents. So in my own case, for example, and again, I mean, we all know this, back in the 80s and 90s, I mean, back in the 90s when I went, nobody went to go study Islamic studies back then, right? I had to literally, fight, the elders and whatnot, and have a tantrum and say, I want to go this and that. That is the attitude that needs to change for the next generation, where our parents collectively, we encourage them, we start giving ideas to them. So no doubt you cannot live your dreams through your children, no doubt. But isn't it true that we generically encourage our kids to get good grades, that we're always concerned that they get into the best universities? We might not necessarily dictate their actual career choice, frankly, many of us do, but even then, we don't specify, like we just say, become a type of engineer, become a type of doctor. And even if we keep on putting it in their heads and they decide to go into medicine, still the actual field and the passion and whatnot, it really does eventually come from the young man or woman, because you cannot replicate passion. You cannot, embed into another person's psyche their own specific goals and desires, but you can create an ambience where you get subconsciously, you give them encouragements. And I've given a number of talks and lectures about this, as we all have, I know, where I tell parents that, put it into your child's head that if you want to become a sheikh, if you become a doctor, great, an engineer, great. And if you will become an Islamic scholar, I'll also support you. Like, put it into their head so that they know those options are there. And collectively, community should come together and support. This is something I encourage, especially in America. I say every masjid should have at least one scholarship that they give to every year or every 3-4 years, where one of their own local students, when they go overseas, they're given financial aid, for example. So the fact that there's a public scholarship, and again, I know, because when I went to Medina, we all suffered financially. I know how difficult it was, because we went through that phase, paying rent, and I didn't have a car. It was just, can you believe, Abu Isa, I gave up ice cream for 6 months. Allah is my witness. Can you believe that I could not eat ice cream? That's how much you give up, akhi. That's like real solid, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
MashaAllah.
Exactly. And so Allah rewarded me with Ben and Jerry's after this. Allah al-Musta'an. My point is that I've been through it, so I know. And I therefore I encourage every community, every group of people to have this generic understanding that from the next generation, there's going to be some people who are going to support. True, we cannot force one individual child, but as I grew up in the 80s and I knew this, everybody of my generation had to become an engineer and doctor. And you know what? Yeah, Abu Isa, we all did, except for me, basically. All of my friends, all of my extended cousins, every one of them, because that was the subconscious culture that we put into our kids, that within this narrow spectrum, you're going to have to go. And it kind of worked, didn't it, right? So what I'm saying is that we need to add to that narrow spectrum one other track, and that is, hey, guys, we need ulama, and we need female du'at as well, not just male. We need scholars of the qira'at and hadith that are females as well, because we need our sisters to have role models as well. So subconsciously, if we start putting this into the psyche of the public, inshallah ta'ala, when the right person comes along, and again, me and you, we both know this, Abu Isa, there are young teenagers that come and we sense in them, these can be future leaders, these can be future ulama. It's our job, with the teachers, to sense that, and then to go to the parents and say, hey, your child here. And by the way, this is what happens across the globe as well. It happened in the case of Imam Bukhari and others, that it's the teachers who sense this, that, oh, this young child isn't like the rest of them. And then they go to the mother or the father, they go to the parents. That's our job. But by that time, the parents as well have to be open-minded and willing, because again, we both know most parents don't even want their children to go down this path. So those that want to go, their parents typically don't want them to go. Those parents that are adamant that their kids go, generally their kids are not interested in going. We need to broaden the circles on both sides.
So the question, so isn't there a danger that someone might hear that and then they kind of take their foot off the gas, then they realize, oh, you know what, that's a good point, I can't really push this. Like at what level, and what's the biting point? Is that what they used to call it when you do the manual car, when you lift up the clutch and the thingy?
Who drives manuals anymore, man? They're all gone out the window.
No, I've only recently been rich enough to afford an automatic car. Yeah, we're benders we are. I think it's called the biting point. Where is the that balance where you take it, or what would you? And I think actually I might be even cheeky and put my third question in, and then you can get to Magnories. Yeah, is that what then do you consider to be the acceptable level, or the required level? I mean, of diyana, of religiosity, with respect to our texts and our things, whatever, which is for you not pushing them to the dreams of scholarship, but not leaving them just like everybody else.
You're talking about for my own kids or for religious?
No, obviously how you, the theory, the belief, and then how you then applied it to your own children, I guess can be a caveat to that. But the principle is that you've just explained, right, that we should be looking for that so that we find the natural person, because they're the ones that are going to do it properly and best, which I completely agree with. The danger of that is that then you kind of then say, right, well, you know what, my kids are fighting back, they're pushing back, so I'm not going to push with them, I'm going to wait for that natural person. So therefore, you're going to then take your foot off the gas, quote unquote. Take your foot off the gas, and as I said in my monologue, they're gone. Okay, this society would suck them up. So you would agree with me that a certain level of diyana, religiosity, deen, ilm needs to be taught. What do you call that minimum level of protection that is the requirement for every Muslim, which should be at least the accepted aspiration?
So Abu Isa, I might disappoint you in particular when I say that my minimum.
I've heard your answer. That's why I want you to say your answer. Yeah,
my minimum is public. My minimum is the minimum that Allah that is the minimum that Allah Azza wa Jal himself requires. I'm not going to make religion more complicated than Allah made it. I'm not going to put wajibat on my own children that Allah did not put wajib on other people. So my minimal is very realistic, and that is that they need to know their own manners of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a level that is acceptable according to any mainstream madhab, and they need to know to ask when they don't know. And I think that is really the goal that we need to all have. Personally, that's my position, that we cannot put on our own children, anybody's children, obligations that Allah did not put on them. And if you look at Islamic history, never did any society, all of it, be full of ulama. That's not the role of any society.
People so again, we're not talking about ulama, right? We're not talking about taking it to the extreme level or the perfecting of knowledge. We're talking about, in your understanding, and obviously you'll appreciate that there's a difference in approach to this between the American culture, which is a far more liberal, more holistic, more, whatever you can call it, and then that which is the UK, which has had Muslims around for longer, practice more confident, more feel that we own the game, more ghettoized, more conservative. So you've got these two different models. And obviously we know that the right way is somewhere in between. And the issue that we're trying to discuss is, what are you actually defining as obligatory knowledge? Because I don't want to, as you said, put something which is more than what is obligatory upon them. We're differing right now, though, on what actually is the obligatory knowledge. Because if you think that it's easy to kind of cop out and say that I don't want them to be scholars, or they can learn the level of the basic levels of madhab and then ask for everything else. But what if I said to you, okay, what about Quran then? What about the Arabic language, for example? What are you going to put as a not pushing them beyond the obligations that Allah hasn't obligated them with?
So again, Quran, they need to know the minimum Quran. Of course, inshallah, in both of our cases, inshallah, our kids have gone beyond that, but that's because
why? Yasir, why?
Because we did push them when they were younger.
But why?
Why did we do that?
Yeah, why did we do that?
Because we both know that the more you have, the better it is.
Right. So,
but is it obligatory? Is it obligatory?
I absolutely agree. Obligatory is a legal answer that completely accept that. That's the correct response from a scholar to a legal question. But now let's go back to real talk, which is what this is meant to be. We know it is better for them, protective for them, a solace for them, in this dark moment for them, someone who's connected to the Quran themselves without us having to tell them, etc., 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 all the obvious reasons. I'm not going to patronize anybody here or yourself, certainly. What is stopping us knowing that we know is better and then telling everybody else that they've got to be better as well?
I'm not. So again, you're mixing again, as you said this, the legal issue from the tarbiyah issue. I have very frank talks with my kids, especially the elder ones that have 3 teenagers, alhamdulillah. And with them, I'm even talking about very advanced issues like modernism and liberalism and democracy. And I feel very, very concerned that they don't just buy this whole paradigm, even though it's not fard ayn, as you know, to know this. But still, these are the types of issues that I'm much more interested in, whether they memorize the long text of what are the arkan of salah. They know how to pray, as every Muslim does. They know the basics of their religion. Obviously, I'm very concerned about protecting their usul, protecting where they get their paradigms, their ethics, their values from. And so for me, the way that I do this is by, believe it or not, sometimes dinner conversations, or sometimes just sitting there and just asking a very ridiculously deep question, and my kids get irritated. But once I asked my eldest, how do you know Islam to be true? I literally asked him this, And he's like, what do you mean? I want you to answer. How do you know that you just born into a Muslim? That's not a question that I would be very comfortable asking a stranger's kid, because I might bring doubts to them, right? But to me, it was a teaching moment. I'm teaching him the istidlal, talked about the fitrah, this and that. So you're asking a very difficult question, because we're mixing the legal issue of what is minimum with our personal, which is the ethics of how we're raising our own children. And I can't expect every parent to do that, because that does require a lot of information on your own, and also child psychology of your own child that I don't know. Maybe for some children, you might open up a Pandora's box if you ask them, how come you're Muslim? That's not, but I know with my kid, I could do that. And I was very frank with him. So I don't know how to answer that question, Abu Isa. I'm just going to have to tell you my own life and leave it.
No, I think you saying, and I think you responding to it, I think is what I wanted. I know it's a difficult question, and it's an awkward question, and to be honest, it's a sensitive one, because it also exposes what we think we've achieved and what we might have wanted to have achieved, whatever. There's no doubt that what you've explained, and also what you explained the process of what you did with Ammar. And by the way, anybody who's listening, just in case you don't know, Shaykh Yasir has Ammar, who's now 20, Yusuf, who's what, 17, 18 now?
Yeah, 18, turning 18.
Yeah, Sarah, 14, 15?
Yep.
Yeah, and Zainab is now 10?
11.
11, okay. So he's been through the whole spectrum, seen it all from the beginning, whatever. Mine, I have a 19, a 17, a 14, 15, I think, maybe 15.
Bro, you're in lockdown. You better know the ages now. You just said you memorized for the first time, you confessed that you memorized the birthdays of your kids.
I don't know what the names are, whatever. I call every single one Mani. I call everyone Hiba. I don't know what's going on. I have a 11, I have a 13-year-old, and I have a 6-year-old. And so we've been through the whatever. So, and they're all in different levels of education. And so just so that people are aware that we're not, because it can be infuriating when you've got someone who just got married speaking about marriage, and you've got, talking about divorce. It's a killer. You've got scholars, who, they're qualified in their fiqh, and they're giving advice on life, where genuinely it's not really actually the Islamic qualification, but experience. And it is important to see that. Now, you see, I expect you 100% to do that. And I think that you asking that question about the key fundamentals, which are very risky, is an important conversation actually that all parents need to ask their children in a way that they know their children best, right? In a way that they don't open up a box which they can't then answer themselves, reduce the confidence then of the kid in them, in their religion, and completely lead to a catastrophe. And it's clear you've identified the most important aspects of a children's faith going forward. You've basically, hit the nail on the head that what's really going to challenge them actually is not whether they know 3 juz or 30 juz. What's going to matter is when they see an outpouring of compassionate response to a crisis that non-Muslims are doing, and the Muslims not doing that, and they start to question, why is it that the Muslims are not doing that? Why is it that Allah has punished all the Muslims? Why is it? These are the things that are going to become more and more in your face. Atheism is going to be shoved down the throat in the most militant way, and then now in the most humanist way. Militant atheism had its few years, in my opinion. I think now they've recognized that the more secular humanist approach, where people are loved into atheism as opposed to theism is now going to be the big threat. So I completely agree with you in terms of prioritizing. So there's no difference between me and you on that. The question is the next stage. Are we just going to accept bare essential minimums? At what point do we say, you know what, we have to push the boat out? We've got to actually take responsibility, because not enough critical mass of herd immunity, okay, to protect the wider community. How are we going to create that minimal number of herd immunity to protect that community?
You can't force a teenager to take advanced classes. It has to come from within. You can force a little child to memorize the Quran. You can drag a 10-year-old to Sunday school where they sit and they are supposedly taught the arkan of salah and wudu. But by the time they're 15, by the time they're 18, even if they've memorized it by the age of 10, if they don't want to keep it, they're not going to keep it. It has to come from within. So again, and you know me, Abu Isam, I'm always pragmatic. I want to flutter down to reality. Most of our kids, most of the kids of the people listening to us, they're not going to be interested in advanced classes, in sitting in weekend seminars of Al-Maghrib and whatnot. We all know for every teenager that comes to Al-Maghrib, 10, 15 are playing Call of Duty or whatever, the latest thing is. They're not interested to come to Al-Maghrib classes. So we need to stop. I know you're not doing this, we need to stop fantasizing that our young men and women, our young daughters and sons are going to memorize Bukhari by the time they're 10 or 11. They're going to know the 10 qira'at by the time they're 15. You can only have such unrealistic expectations when you don't have kids, to be honest. You cannot have actual children living in the Western world and then still daydream. I thought my child would memorize Bukhari by the time he's 10 years old. That's before I got married. Then when you actually have kids, those expectations are thrown out the window. Therefore, we get back to the lowest common denominator always, and that is you need to preserve Iman in your children. That is the lowest common denominator. You need to make sure that when your son or daughter is 20, 30, 40, that they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough to be doing the arkan, and that they are sheltered from the problems around them intellectually and essentially, that inshallah ta'ala they'll be upon Salat al-Mustaqim. Now obviously you cannot guarantee that, but that's your job and goal. How you do that is more of a psychological issue. It's more of a logistical issue. And for some parents, it's going to be trying to take them to Al-Maghrib classes or the Sunday schools. And for other parents, in my particular case, it's through conversations that I have with my kids, at opportune times. With my daughters, they're very irritated at this. I bring up a lot of times issues of liberalism and feminism because my views, believe it or not, they're not as dissimilar to yours as most people think, but I'm not going to go there. So let's not scratch that too much. But so I talk to them about these issues because I am genuinely worried that they won't understand Islam's paradigm. And they're going to find other things very alluring and attractive. And that's going to bring about a crisis of faith. So my way of doing it is very different than other people's way. But the point is the goal should be the same. And that is the preservation of Iman in the next generation.
No, Jazakallah khair. I'm glad that you focused that on the priority. Aspirations is another thing. And definitely we can agree that aspirations are good, and to increase upon the base level of knowledge is a great thing to aim for. But we should not allow that to take our eyes off the prize, which is the common denominator, the most fundamental protection. All right, so I'm now 3 and you are on 1. So good luck to you, bro.
I know, seriously, you're just hogging up everything. Okay, another really frank question, bro, and I want everybody to understand the question and then hear both of our responses, but beginning with you. Do you treat your sons and daughters differently? And if so, how? And if so, why?
Yes, I definitely treat them differently. The why is for all the obvious reasons. I'm not that, I couldn't care less about what people, want me to say. They are different, they are biologically different, they are emotionally different, they are hormonally different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them different. Allah did not make them the same in any single way other than what they can achieve in terms of taqwa. And so I then react in accordance in the commensurate way. So, for example, if I am angry, I can't shout, let alone physically grab one the same as the other. The boys are tough; they can handle things physically. The girls, I would look at my daughter the wrong way; she starts crying, Miskina. So, It's just common sense. That's common sense. And I think that obviously the big problem of our current time is that people are so terrified, to be politically correct and to make sure that we don't do anything in the wrong way, according to society. This is a nonsense. This is, of course, the big danger, that we're allowing a flawed, adulterous teacher to try and teach us what we should be teaching our children. That's very, very important, which is why, even though folks might be thinking I disagree with Shaykh Yasir a lot, that I'm the conservative, he's the liberal, he's actually spot on when it comes. You might be thinking that, why is he not pushing us to study and to do hifz and whatever? He's not saying that. He's actually doing something quite profound. He's bringing your attention to a point that is deeper than you appreciate. So you're thinking that the threat to the aqidah of your kids, that why is Islam true? What you're thinking, that's just a basic question. Actually, he has seen every manifestation that has created the doubt to the answer of that question from every angle, from feminism, from liberalism, from an ontological argument, from X, from Y. And he knows that the one who's more certain of the answer to this will be able to defend themselves from every angle. So I completely agree with you that we've got to be, to focus on what you just said. And I would never allow myself to be, my focus to be taken off the board. That what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed with respect to gender roles, their physical capabilities and capacities, is what I use and what I follow. If I, just on the issue of child discipline, and I'm not going to go into that because obviously going into that in public is dangerous anyway, and let alone the size of the subject. We have a whole session in the class on child discipline, the classical approach to it, the Islamic rulings concerning it, the boundaries, and so on and so forth. There is no difference, actually, from a technical point of view, when it comes to the ruling on a boy and a girl. And that's not me being liberal. That's actually from a Shari'i point of view, the fuqaha, when they put down the rulings about what can be done, what can be not done, the pulling of the ear, for example, the striking of the head, permissible, not permissible, X, Y, Z, kicking up the backside, whatnot. Ironically, you'll find that they are more feminist than you can ever imagine, or more liberal than you can ever imagine, because the law actually, from a Shari'a point of view, doesn't differentiate. In other areas, it does, in terms of roles and so on, in terms of expectations and so on, in terms of their primary goal and so on. And again, what you've asked is, I know that it's a big issue and it's a lot there to unpack. We had to spend, I think, 3 sessions in the class, like 3.5 hours, talking about women, the role of women in the future modern Islamic society. How are we as practicing Muslims going to balance between what we want from our women, from our daughters, and what society wants from them, and how we reach a happy medium? I'll say this, and just to close on this answer, that the reason that there's so much difficulty with the men dealing with feminism is because it has led to the financial empowerment of our Muslim women. And that financial empowerment has meant a loss of power and a loss of control. And that loss of power and loss of control for men has put them in crisis. And they're having to reassess absolutely everything now from a weaker position than what they used to be. And that conversation needs to happen. Everybody needs to now recalibrate their ideas and thoughts without losing their minds, And that's a combination of Sharia and a combination of the reality, as you would say, the real world, which is very different. So that's what I'll say,
Okay, Jay, you took it to different tangents as well. That's fine. Again, I would very much agree with the bulk of what you said. And in my own case as well, there definitely is a marked difference in bias. And in my case, I think my girls are older than yours. So I've also began to get some pushback and some very difficult questions as well in this regard. You cannot protect your own kids from the society around. And I'm already getting some very, very difficult questions about why is it allowed for this and not allowed for that? Why can he do this and not me? And why this? And it's not easy to try to explain, even to my own. It's not easy. And I think in your case, your girls are a little bit younger. Just wait till they get to the teenage years and whatnot, and you will also see.
So let me tell you something. There's a section that we do in the class. It's a large section actually, but it's on schooling. Public school versus private school versus grammar school versus boarding school versus madrasa versus Islamic school, I think. So all of the schooling, and then versus home schooling. and we compare each one's pros and cons, and we look at all of them. And that's very important. I think that Muslims need to be aware and they don't get too awed by one particular model. Each one has a pro and a con. So we go through all of that in detail. And then I do an exercise. I say to them, right, the problem, of course, is availability and resources. So first of all, you've got to be in an area where you've got all the options on the table. And then B, if you've got all the options on the table, you've got to be able to afford the option that you want to choose. Now, the problem is a lot of the time that we're speaking to the privileged, right? Or we're speaking from a position of privilege where we think, yeah, everybody can afford it. But the truth is they can't. A lot of people, certainly in the UK, the vast majority of people are going to free schools, right? And so when you make that decision about, first of all, I've got the funds, that might be fine for a single kid. You can invest everything you want into that single kid and that's job done. But what if you've got 5 kids? What if you've got 7 kids? What if you've got a mixture of boys and girls? The exercise I put to them is, who are you going to choose? And even more difficult, that person that you choose, let's say you've got limited funds, and so therefore you can only focus on a certain aspect of the children. And in UK, we call it primary school and secondary school. What do you guys call it?
So it's middle school and high school.
Middle school and high school. So middle school ends when?
In 8th grade. 9, 10, 11, 12 as high school.
What age does middle school end? What age is middle school?
The 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, 14. So 15, 16, 17, 18 is high school.
Right. Okay. So what's below middle school then?
Primary school.
What age does primary finish at?
It's 5th grade.
So that's 9 or 10.
Yes, 9 and 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you've got 3 then. So in the American case, you've got you can either only afford primary. Yeah. And when I say afford, I mean the best form of education protection from an Islamic point of view. Yeah. So that's the exercise. Yeah. So you've got limited sum and you've got limited resources, and you're trying to protect your child for the world out there. You've got a boy and a girl, multiple, and you've got 3 areas to focus on. You can only choose one boy or the girl, so one gender, and you can only choose one aspect of schooling, either primary, middle, or high, which is the one you put your money in. So I put it to you.
Well, obviously, you're going to put your girls in the Islamic school, and
okay. Which one? Well, which phase? The primary, middle, or high?
You know, an argument can be made for both primary and for high school, but I personally would do high school because it is the greatest danger right then and there.
So I'm glad you said that. So the point is that exercise gets people really, like you just said, you just stopped and you thought about it and you said a couple, then you went with that. That thought process is happening in us all the time. That's a natural bias towards the one that we see under threat most. And there's nothing wrong in thinking that. And we've got to make sure that if we say, I'm worried about my daughter, that people don't come and say to you, that's sexist, or that's liberal, or that's whatever. You know, and obviously me and you are right, like that, we couldn't care less. But that is the threat out there, right? The feminist voice will say that this is, anti-feminist, this is misogynist, that you're treating your girl like that. I don't mind if they say that. I'm a man, right? I know how men manipulate women. I know how, and every father, that's the whole point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed the father as the wali as opposed to the mother to be the wali. You know how evil men can be, you know how powerful men can be, you understand the system. We were also at school and we used to interact with the girls and we know who's more at threat. This is not I'm not talking about that, you know, if a girl and a boy come to the marriage situation and you know that the boy's had a previous relationship and that the girl's has a previous relationship, that the girl's written off forever and the boy isn't. That's a cliche that we all know about. We're not talking about that. I'm saying that the natural reaction for us to protect certain genders in a more specific way is definitely from the Sunnah, something we should not be ashamed about. Definitely. And anyway, like I said, that's a huge discussion about what one you choose. There's pros and cons in which age you go with, which one is more protective. But in general, the majority will go, and correctly so, to some kind of Islamic or ethical, paid for high quality education for a higher age as opposed to the younger age girl in the family, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, and even in my own case, again, I was very clear in my family. The girls, I just refused to let them go public school. And even though the quality maybe was better in the others, but I was like, I don't care. I know how the system is and I need to be protective. It's my job. Allah put me in charge of protecting these kids, and I'm not going to allow my girls, as far as I'm concerned, as long as I'm alive, to be risked in any manner. For the boys, I did send them to a private boys-only school. I wasn't an Islamic school for reasons beyond the scope of our conversation. There wasn't the equivalent. But for the girls, I do feel, and they maybe even felt this way, that the boys got the better education and whatnot because they went to the elite, one. But I wanted them to be in the Islamic environment, surrounded by Muslims, and I did not, and I'm still not allowing them to go, beyond this. And I don't know I can't explain it because they don't understand. They really think, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And I even if they don't understand, it's my job to protect them. And that's the end of the story. Alhamdulillah, I can still say I'm the father and this is what is going to be going. And whether people understand it or not, whether certain feminists like it or not, whether even my own daughters like it or not, my job is to protect them in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is my number one obligation to do. That's all it's going to be. So.
And I think that there'll be so many parents that are watching this right now that can recognize what you've just said, that pushback, that anger, that not accepting it, and the parent going through real pangs of guilt, knowing that this is hurting them, that they don't want to do it. And as you said at the beginning, we've got to try and create an organic, a natural desire to be guided. And the more you force something, you always risk them rebelling. And that's for me, it's the biggest challenge. For me, the biggest challenge of parenting is to create that right balance where you yourself know you've got to stick to the game plan, but you've got to get buy-in from the kids. And what every parent here is going to realize is this, and this is me now speaking to all of you directly. Let me just give you an address here. Your children, when you have them and when they're young, they're the greatest, most beautiful blessings that you will ever see. They change your life. They give you such joy. The happiness that you will achieve with your younger children is unparalleled. The pain that they will cause you in their teenage years is unparalleled. The anguish, the anger, the disappointment is unparalleled. And I just want to say, you will be shaken. Your principles will be shaken. Your belief in your methodology will be shaken. It's coming from Quran, Sunnah, from experience, from evidence, from scientists, but they are rejecting it. They're choosing something so silly, so whatever. And you will really start to doubt yourself. You will really start to feel that, what, maybe I should just stick to an obligation or give up on that dream or whatever. I just want to say to you, you've got to hang in on there. Okay, you have to hang in. This is the long-term goal. This is the difference between ta'aleem and tarbiyah, which is a session that I might even actually release from the class onto Facebook, because I just think it's so important to understand that if you recognize your role as the murabbi, as tarbiyah, then it is intrinsic in the definition of tarbiyah that it's a long-term game. You've got to have supreme patience. And I do want to reassure you that if you can hang in, when they get to that 18, 19, 20, your heart will feel such sukoon that they actually now understand. They will also feel a regret for what they did, but you just got to get there. And it's getting there. You just think it's too far away. It's not going to happen. Shaykh Yasir, you also shared that with me recently as well, with your side as well, right?
Yes, you just have to, there has to be a time when they will be let out of the nest, boy or girl, right? There has to be a time when you can't fully control them. That's going to happen late teenage years or maybe even after that. When that time comes, you had better have done the best you could have up until that point in time. You don't want to have any regrets before you let them out of the cage. And we have to finish up over here as well, because I have another issue I have to go to, so our hour is up. But I wanted to just conclude on some parting thoughts that I wasn't able to squeeze in. My generic philosophy is that compassion and mercy and love with a little bit of strict discipline is the way that you need to be a parent. Err on the side of compassion, but there have to be red lines, right? Be as merciful as you can, but your child has to know that there are certain red lines that he or she cannot cross. And always remember that the goal is not just to win the argument of the hour. It's not just to discipline for that one infraction that you're currently angry at. The goal is that 40 years from now, when your son or daughter is herself a parent, they will reflect on what you did on that particular day and how you handled their own infraction, so that they can then replicate what you have done. In other words, without sounding melodramatic, your actions will literally have repercussions for at least a generation or two to come. So you cannot think of winning the battle to lose the war. You cannot think of winning that one day to lose the respect or the love that your son or daughter has for you. You have to think long term. And sometimes that means compromise on the side of strictness. Sometimes it means compromise on the side of mercy. Generally, it means on the side of mercy. From my side, the final point I want to say, you do whatever you can. And in the end, really, it is Allah's qadr. You cannot dictate, you cannot force your son or daughter to be religious once they have come of age and left the nest. You can only do as much as you can. Make lots and lots of dua. And by the way, never, ever underestimate the power of dua. Half a dozen Quranic verses are duas from parents to children. Think about that. Allah literally gave us luqma. Allah literally told us in the Quran, رَبِّ هَبْ لِي مِن لَدُنكَ ذُرِّيَّةً طَيِّبَةً رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّتَنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. Half a dozen duas are in the Quran, right? رَبِّ اجْعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. Okay? وَابْعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِنْهُمْ. Yani dua after dua after dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in the Quran. And why do you think our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said 3 are the duas that Allah always responds to? And one of them, the dua of the parent for a child. So how foolish we are if we don't make dua for our own children. How cold-hearted can we be that Allah has promised us, the Prophet has promised us that if the dua is done properly, it's going to be answered, and yet we don't make dua. So lots of love, lots of compassion, lots of trial and error. We're going to all fall short in everything. And then put your trust in Allah, raise your hands up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hope for the best. And that's all that you can do in the end of the day. And if you've done that, at least you in your own life will be successful in the akhirah. You know, as for your children, again, and if you've done what you can, even the son of Nuh turned out the way that he did. You know, what can you do about that? I mean, it's just, it happens. May Allah protect all of us. But we what can be said, man? It's a very sensitive and emotional topic. You know, it does overwhelm our hearts. The fear, the dread of something else happening, it's very terrifying, even to all of us. And I want our viewers to know this, that even the both of us, we have the same dread and terror, if not more so than everybody else does. There's no guarantee, whoever you are, that your child's going to turn out, you know, like you. We're all in this together. Lots of love and dua, and the rest is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
La wala jazakallah khair. Kalam qayyim wallahi. And that pretty much summarizes. And actually, what I want to emphasize everything that Shaykh Yasir just said. You know, as much as we're saying is so important, but you can't fall into despair of this. This is real depression material. You can really, really become, you know, and actually one of the things that we're going to be speaking about a lot next week is, as a result of all this close family time, it's actually had a very bad reaction in a significant number of people. And domestic violence rates have rocketed towards our wives, towards our children, and yet actually towards our husbands as well. From the wives to the husbands is a very real portion as well, not commensurate of course to the main form, but it's happening. And this is because of despair. People realize, and then you throw in all of the, and that's something that we're going to be discussing with Shaykh Umar next week, and then other rights. I want to share an insight, Shaykh Yasir, because this is something that you might not be aware of, but obviously this is what I spend a lot of time with. You remember that Protect This House is based upon Imam al-Bukhari's Al-Adab al-Mufrad. And when you look at this whole book of hadith, he actually starts off with speaking about the parents, then he goes generic to the family, and then he goes to the kids, right? And what's interesting, I don't know if you know, is that he gave 100 hadith to the issue of the family, like almost exactly 100, as if he wants to start with the first hadith about parents, and then he ends the 100th with a 6 or 7 kind of hadith, building up to the 100th. And the 100th is the statement of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, where he said that I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, Allah the Mighty and Exalted has divided up mercy into 100 portions. He retained 99 portions with himself and sent 1 portion to earth. It is because of this portion that the creation is merciful to one another, to the extent that the mare lifts its hooves away from its fowl for fear of harming it. As if Imam Bukhari is, because you know and I know, the book of adab is about adab, it's about everything. What on earth is a hadith of mercy doing there? What on earth are 5 hadith of mercy doing there? Because Imam Bukhari is basically saying that the number 1 key ingredient for being successful in the tarbiyah of your children is to have mercy, to have mercy, to have mercy. That's what's going to be the number 1 ingredient that's going to take you through. So what you actually said is exactly what the scholars always said. So I'll end this session with something which I think at least it's a takeaway. there's a lot to take away, hopefully, for you. Obviously, I'm saying you must study this class. It is the most important class I teach, and you really must appreciate all of the content, the issues, the threats, and how to deal with it. But also the values that you must hold, the emotions that you must keep in check, and to not lose your mind. And to that extent, I want to share a nice poem that I use in the class as well, which goes something like this. If I had my child to raise all over again, I'd build self-esteem first and the house later. I'd finger paint more and point the finger less. I would do less correcting and more connecting. I'd take my eyes off my watch and watch more with my eyes. I would care to know less and know to care more. I'd take more hikes, I'd fly more kites. I would run through more fields and gaze at more stars. I'd do more hugging, I'd do less tugging. I'd see the oak tree in the acorn more often. I would be firm less often and affirm much more. I'd focus less on the love of power and more on the power of love. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Jazakumullah khair. I think we're done. But Jazakumullah khair, folks, make sure you don't miss this opportunity to take the class, because it's only going to be there for a few more days, and we've got obviously other priorities and to get on with preparing the community for other things. But listen, Shaykh Yasir, Jazakumullah khair. Appreciate your time, bro.
Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, until next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care, guys. Barakallah feek. Assalamu alaikum.